Hello everyone, my name is Bladen Brightrider and I'm an incident meteorologist with the National Weather Service, here to give you a weather update for today, Thursday, September 12th. So before we go into anything that's happening today, I want to take a step back and look at kind of what happened yesterday. If you're in the local area, you're probably aware that we had what is called a particularly dangerous situation red flag warning. These are incredibly uncommon. In fact, the last one that was issued by the National Weather Service in Reno was done so back in 2019, and I believe overall they've only ever issued 6 of these PDS RFWs, particularly dangerous situation red flag warnings, and what they're considered as very high-end red flag warnings, meaning that they're not necessarily seeing that very typical, gusts to 20 or 30 miles an hour and relative humidity that's down around 15%. They're looking at much more extreme conditions, usually looking at single-digit relative humidity values during the day, and then we're looking at winds that are getting in excess of over 50 miles per hour. So what we saw yesterday was this guy. This is a big upper low. We could also just call it an upper disturbance. It started to track in from the Pacific Northwest, and this is actually what's dropping a bunch of precip up there. That white that you see on this water vapor imagery is going to be a lot of the showers, the thunderstorms, and the like that is coming out of this disturbance. But what comes around on the southern end here, which is what hit us in this area here, were just a lot of winds and a lot of dry air with those winds. So if we look at the map here, what we saw across the high terrain, this is getting into Mount Rose and then Slide Mountain. If we go a little bit off map, we started to see anywhere from 70 to 75 miles an hour during the afternoon, and even in the overnight periods, we were still seeing gusts up around 60 miles an hour. As we got off of the high terrain into the highlands and some of these lowland valleys down here, we were still seeing gusts around 50 to 60 miles per hour, and even as up as 40 miles an hour as we got into the evening hours. In addition to those incredibly extreme winds, we saw relative humidity values get into those single digits, and they weren't just doing it when it's typical, which is usually in the mid to late afternoon hours. They were doing it overnight and even into the evening. So that's incredibly uncommon. That's taking, conditions that we see in the afternoon and displacing them and putting them at night when we should be seeing our best humidity recovery, when we should be seeing winds that are a little bit calmer and easier to manage in the case of a fire environment. So it was a very prolonged event. It was a very extreme event. And yet we had this footprint here that didn't really move at all. So huge kudos out to everybody that was working this incident yesterday and the days ahead of this, because we knew it was coming, so that they were able to prepare and get this ready, because I have been on a fire with those same conditions, very similar footprint, that did not react in the same fashion. So that's really quite incredible work by them. The good news is, starting today, we have much quieter weather. We're looking at winds today primarily out of the north, maybe the northwest or a little bit to the northeast. And when I talk about winds, I want to make sure everybody knows I'm saying from the north, from the northwest, from the northeast. That gets you a good vantage point when I'm talking about how this stuff is supposed to move and how that can actually impact the fire. So if these were stronger winds, that could be challenging for that southern line down there. But for the good news is, for the most part, these winds are going to be very, very light. We're expecting wind gusts today to maybe at their most on the lowland areas reach about 12 miles per hour. As we get onto the high terrain where we see more of our general winds, maybe we see more 15 to 20 miles an hour, but that's a lot better than what we saw on Wednesday with that anywhere from 50 to 75 miles per hour. Our relative humidity, much improved. So we're going from single digits, getting back into the 20 to 30% range. So that's going to be a huge help to kind of get those fuels recovered down on the ground. In addition to that, it's going to be very stable. So a lot of times you'll hear meteorologists when we're in fire weather will talk about instability or the Haynes index, and all that's talking about is air's propensity to rise. Air is like me, it is tired. It just wants to fall down. So when we have unstable air, which is what we don't want in a fire situation, that's when we can see a lot of upscale growth, and that's what can help fuel that fire to become more extreme. So behind cold fronts in this case, we're not looking at any amounts of instability. There's a lot of stable air out there. So it should be a very, very quiet day for them today and tomorrow. Now, as we get into the weekend, that's when things get a little bit more complicated. We have another disturbance, very similar in style to this guy. It's going to track a little bit differently though, whereas this one came and hit a lot of the northwestern portion of the continental U.S. The one that'll be coming in that's well off map at this point will actually come down, and it looks like its center might actually position right over us as we go into the Sunday-Monday time frame. That is more likely, assuming that it actually takes the track that the models are suggesting. That is suggesting that we will see less wind with this event, and we likely will see more precipitation. So we're starting to look into that 50 to 60% range for a chance for precip as we get into Monday. And so that could be a really, really huge help as well as we're moving forward and moving into next week. Much colder temperatures too. I know we just talked about we had a cold front come through, and we've gone from like the upper 80s, lower 90s in this area down into what is beautiful 60-degree weather today. With the system that is on the docket to hit us next week, we could be looking at much more fall-like temperatures, with some of these areas not even getting out of the lower 50s during the day next week. So keep your eye on that and stay tuned. We'll have more information as we get a better handle on what actually the models are starting to come in agreement on moving forward. So that's all I got for you guys today. Thank you so much, and have a good one.